Uhuru Sasa, which means freedom now, or maybe I should say Nangadef, and hit you with a little wall off. But we're going to be speaking with Ameth Lo, a Senegalese-born Pan-Africanist militant residing in Toronto, and he studied computer science at the university in France, and he graduated in 1990 and was active in student politics. He pursued advanced studies in Paris, where he helped to organize an organization there, the Organization for Unity of Students of African Ancestry. It was a student organization based at that university, and most of the members were from Africa and the French-speaking Caribbean, such as Martinique, which is the birthplace of Frantz Fanon, and Guadeloupe. I think Aimé Césaire was from Guadeloupe, and he worked in solidarity with those comrades, brothers and sisters. He moved to Montreal in 1993, and he joined GRILA, the Group for Research and Initiatives for the Liberation of Africa. Later in 1995, he became a founding member of a chapter of GRILA based in Toronto, Canada, and he had a radio show called Amandla, and at one point he was on CKLN, a station that we were a part of for many, many years, and he's also the co-author of the book Claim No Easy Victories, The Legacy of Amilcar Cabral. So welcome to Diasporic Music, and they hit you with some Nanga Def. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, and thank you for inviting me, and also thanks for your collaborators. It's very much appreciated that you give us a voice every time to come and then share some of our analysis on events happening in Africa in general, and also try to link up with struggles in the Black diaspora and in the global South in general, in the global world. Thanks for that opportunity.
I guess the first thing we wanted to talk about a little bit of history of Senegal and the West Africa, particularly the Francophone part of West Africa. And could you tell us what the current situation is?
Yes, if you look at the situation in West Africa recently, I mean, the last couple of years, 10 years or so, you will notice that there has been a wave of military coup that have swept across what is called the Sahel region, and that brought to power some popular supportive military groups in power right now in 3 different countries, in Niger, in Burkina Faso, and Mali. We have also a military coup that occurred in Guinea, but also outside of the West African region in Gabon. So the coup do not have the same characteristic, but we can see that there is a little bit of uniformity in the situation in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and Guinea at least. Now, a key reason that is often attributed to this military takeover has been the deteriorating security situation in the Sahel due to failure by previous pro-Western regime that were in place, and that incapacity to defeat what is called jihadist forces that have wreaked havoc on the region, with lots of innocent civilians bearing the brunt of the violence that was being unleashed by these terrorist groups. while the above is those elements are true, the quest to rid the region of imperial exploitation by France and its Western allies and overall also reflects the people's desire to have a new African-centered political dispensation. These are major critical factors that are behind what we can see today as overwhelming youth support to the military orchestrated change that occurred in those countries. As part of the US-led geopolitics of war on terror, we have seen that Western intelligence agencies have planted these so-called jihadist forces in the Sahel region in order to destabilize the entire region. And then what happened next is that once the process of destabilization is underway already, the same forces that are behind it are coming back under the pretext of fighting terror, whether it is the French, who are working with very closely with AFRICOM, which is the United States African Command that was based in Germany, in Stuttgart. They both deployed in the past last couple of decades, occupation forces with a strategic objective, which was centered around the need to secure unfettered access to the vital resources that are existing in the Sahel region, whether it is gold or oil or gas reserves or uranium deposits. So with this assertive junta that are in power, we have witnessed a couple of recent activities that are articulated around the articulation of an anti-French, anti-West, or to some extent also sometimes anti-imperialist rhetoric that have led to the expulsion of French diplomats from the region. But we have been witnessing also recently more and more call coming from the youth for the demilitarization of the region. And also that comes at the same time with a discourse on decolonization and calls for total liberation that have started to dominate the political and intellectual landscape that is happening in the region. So here we are with a region that is not only in turmoil from a security perspective, but we have also new ideas emerging, asking for a new order, and then a new order that is supposed to be different from the new colonial path that have been taken by these countries since their independence in 1960. So that's the context that we have to understand and analyze what's happening right now in the Sahelian Alliance, in the Alliance of Sahelian States, which is a grouping of three countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, who are trying to move into what they call an alliance, but beyond the objective declared is go through a confederation in order to pull the resources together to be able, first of all, to defeat the jihadist forces that are operating in the region and then recover total control over their territory. Number two, to engage in the process of transformation that will challenge the historical control that has been exerted on the natural resources of the continent by Western imperialism. So that's to start, I think that's the background I wanted to give to people. But of course, within that context, there are multiple questions that can be raised, and we can go a little bit further into those.
Melinda, you have some questions.
Yeah. sorry. My question is like, with a sort of ongoing coalition of forces on the north side, and the pressure on all fronts, what can we do on sort of the global north to kind of support the anti-imperialist sort of forces in the region?
Yeah, the first moral responsibility for people, wherever they may be located on this planet Earth, is to express maybe the sentiment of solidarity with people who have been going through this difficult situation in the region on the ground. And when I talk about the people suffering from the situation, I'm not talking about the political leadership at the head of the state, but the millions or millions of people, whether they are cattle raisers or peasants moving around, displaced population, not having no longer access to the means of production, which is the land to produce what they can produce to provide for their families, schools that are closed, villages that are burned down, and all the instability that comes with it. So there's a need to raise on the international level, not only to manifest solidarity, but also to explain more what I just raised a little bit in my introduction, which is the underlying causes that are behind this instability and this struggle going on right now, which is a thirst for a system of capitalist exploitation and of imperialism to continue to have a hand or an exclusive control over the natural resources of these African countries in a context of a geopolitical order that is in full reconfiguration today. Not only do you have the former imperialist power and Western countries who are still trying to maintain their hold on the region, but you have new actors also who are emerging, who are trying to challenge those ancient forces, and that's why you have everybody trying to have access to the region, and this geopolitical fight between forces and coming from the Western world and new actors, whether they are from United Arab Emirates or Turkey or Russia or China, who are also to develop new relationships with African countries, is something that people need to keep an eye on, because one of the challenges for these African countries is how to break away from all the domination without falling back into a new type of domination by anyone. So how African countries can build a common ground, politically organized, as what is being attempted right now in the Sahel region between Mali and Burkina Faso and Niger, that would allow them to be on a negotiating table with anybody and be able to defend their interests. For that to happen, of course, they need to build strategic alliances, which is what is happening right now with different countries that are not from the Western Hemisphere. But as I say, it's important that people understand all those elements that justify or that explain why we have what is happening right now in the region in terms of instability, because the same forces that were at the origin of the instability and the insecurity situation, which is the Western powers, are the ones today who are coming back and then try to portray themselves as firefighters. And by doing so, they are trying to also describe the other forces who are trying to build alliances with the African countries, whether it is China or Russia or other countries, as being their propaganda machine is trying to depict them as potential exploiters or colonizers, as they have been for centuries, which is not true, because I don't think that China have any possibility to spread the continent with military bases, because we know that the presence of military forces is an element that is being used by the dominant power in order to exert control. I don't think the agenda is the same. China, of course, have its own natural interest as a state. Russia, same thing. Turkey, same thing. India, whether it is Brazil, that's normal, that's natural. All states have their own interests, and it is up to the people from those states to get organized enough to put their interests on the table of negotiation and have the freedom to choose by themselves who they ally with at each time in the process, and that one-on-one communication between Africa and Europe or Africa and the Western world cannot continue for long.
You're listening to Diasporic Music on Black Power 96. I have a question for you, and this deals with which direction we should be as a people, which way we should be going. There's like what they call a line struggle going on, where you have some people in the Pan-African movement that believe that Pan-Africanism should be, a Cape Town to Cairo unity. Then there's another line that says there should be Cape Town to Nova Scotia. The people that believe Africans, be they in Johannesburg or in Nova Scotia, should be united. Then you have a line, the Katanga province, the FBA crowd that basically believe that narrow nationalists, they take a narrow nationalist position, that we should basically, Caribbean folks should stick to the Caribbean folks and the African, and they even go further by saying, Caribbean folks should divide themselves into Francophone Africa, or Lusophone, so on and so forth. How do you see Pan-Africanism in 2025?
Pan-Africanism in 2025 has to be seen within the context of Pan-Africanism at the origin, at the beginning. First, at the beginning, Pan-Africanism is a political ideology of Black liberation, and that took root initially in the diaspora, especially starting with the Haitian Revolution. So after that, another major event that have shifted and then have played a very important role for the struggle of African people have been the rise of Marcus Garvey in Jamaica, and also all the movement that developed from there on with people like Booker T. Washington. In the U.S., you have all generation of people in the Caribbean, in Trinidad, people like C.L.I. James and etc., who have all contributed tremendously to advancing the struggle for African liberation. So what has been interesting is that in 1945, with the Manchester Congress, that's when the junction between those forces from the diaspora and the forces from Africa have connected and have set on the table an agenda for the end of colonialism. So people like, so there was no surprise that people like George Padmore and C.L.I. James and were side by side with people like Kwame Nkrumah from Ghana or Jomo Kenyatta from Kenya in drafting the orientation, strategic orientation of the decolonization process. And when Nkrumah went back to Ghana and with the advance of Ghana's independence, some people have managed to even go back from the diaspora, a lot of intellectuals to contribute to the struggle, because they were all grounded around the idea that the liberation of African people in the continent is tied to the liberation of Black people across the diaspora. It's the prerequisite. One cannot go without the other. And that is also because of that reason and that understanding that lots of people in the diaspora went back in Tanzania in the late 70s. People like it's called George, from Walter Rodney and a whole bunch of other intellectuals who managed to get back to Africa and try to work with the emerging political leadership that was trying to draft a new course of development. So 2025 Pan-Africanism cannot be disconnected from the historical process that has been going on for almost 200 years, which is the African people trying to recover a control over their destiny that has been interrupted by the advent of slavery first, and after that by the neo-colonial project. And all that has been going on for centuries, not continuously because it has been gone. At the same time, there has been resistance all across during that period. And that's why you had the Haitian Revolution. That was one of the first successful Black rebellion in the diaspora to put an end to the system of slavery. And we have seen how it has impacted the other people who were struggling for liberation, whether it is in South America with Bolivar and Venezuela, and also later on the connection that arises with the involvement of Cuba in the struggle to put an end to apartheid in Southern Africa, where Cubans have sent hundreds of thousands of people in Angola to fight alongside the liberation force in Angola to defeat what was mostly considered as up to that point as undefeatable force, which is the white supremacy army of South Africa. And it was during that conjunction of forces that at Quito-Pana Valley, the South African Defense Forces were defeated militarily. And that opens up a new era that led to the independence of Namibia, the liberation of Nelson Mandela from prison, and the freedom fighters, and the advent of the first multi-racial elections in South Africa that officially put an end to the apartheid system, at least from its form as a state structure, even though today we still have the economic injustices and the discrepancies on the social status between Black people and the rest of the population is still there. The land question is still unresolved. The question of economic justice hasn't been resolved yet. The question of nationalization of the land is still pending, whether it is in South Africa or in other areas. So today, to summarize it, people have to see Pan-Africanism as a continuous, ongoing process of struggle. Sometimes it may accelerate and go fast in some areas, like it was in the early 60s with the independence of African countries, with the Black Power movement in North America. It can accelerate sometimes as potentially as what is happening today in the Sahel region, which is the alliance of Sahel States, Niger, Mali, and Burkina. And in other times, it can also decelerate and become slower in terms of things happening, to the point where some people may ask a question, what's happening, and then it has a struggle died. No, it's a dialectical struggle with advances and rollback sometimes, but it's a consistent process moving necessary towards the liberation of Black people and African people, whether it is in Africa or in the Black diaspora.
This is going to be the final question. There was a brother by the name of Alpheus Hinton. I believe Alpheus Hinton, might be mispronouncing his name. And his wife, and I apologize, I can't remember his wife's name, but Alpheus Hinton was actually born in Canada. He inspired Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, and he actually wrote the foreword. He wrote Muhammad Abdul Rahman Muhammad Babu wrote the introduction, and I think Alpheus Hinton wrote the preface. But Hinton is in there, and Walter quotes him a lot. He actually was went to Ghana, and when Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown, he moved to Zambia. And I believe he and his wife, both of them, joined the ancestors in Zambia. I wanted to just put that on the table so people could do a little research on on Brother Hinton. And do you have anything else to add to the interview?
No, it's important that you raise that question. Also, that shows that this struggle for Pan-Africanism and for liberation is also tied to the international question that also involves internationalist solidarity between forces. That's why I mentioned the case of Cuba and those forces also who are for whom the question of social justice or is important on the agenda, has been supportive to the struggle of African liberation. Of course, the work have to be done by those who suffer from the situation first, which is the African people, whether it is the Caribbean or the diaspora or in Africa. But usually it comes also with the support and with international forces who are not generally of African descent and who can also play a role in terms of support, why a process have to be initiated, organized, properly organized, and driven by those who initially are the main person, people suffering from the situation. So I would encourage people to continue to follow very closely the situation in the Alliance Operation State and not to fall into the propaganda of the West, trying to dismiss the current situation, just in order to create the condition for the return to an era that is bound to disappear. There are some interesting initiatives that took place in that region with attempts to nationalize some of the mining sectors to recover at least a control over those resources so that they can provide with financing of their own development processes. There have been, they ask the removal of the foreign military bases in the region, whether it is the American forces or the French forces from the region, because they understand that those forces were complicit with the jihadist forces that have been there. Despite all the technological tools at their disposal, they haven't been able to defeat these forces. And then history has shown that they have been in conjunction, working closely underground with these forces to maintain the situation of instability. So people have to be very, very aware of all the propaganda machinery that's behind right now, try to discredit the process using advanced technologies like the AI, fake video, fake news, etc. And then continue to provide not a blind support to the leadership in the region, but a critical support in terms of trying to highlight some of the key elements that are prerequisite for a more profound revolutionary transformation in this region, and that involve popular mobilization, having a strategic roadmap on where to go as of today, going forward, how to go about it, with who to go with it, and then move forward with setting up those structures and institutional tools and mechanisms that will bring together these peoples across those different countries into a single unified political bloc that will be able to play a role in defending their interests on the world scale. That's some of the key elements I think you need to keep in mind.
And the last thing I want to say is I believe that there were two groups of Pan-African, or two blocks of the Casablanca group and the Monrovia group. The Monrovia group was pro-West coming out of Liberia, and the Casablanca group and the Monrovia group, if I'm not mistaken, were all quote unquote Black Africans, and I think the Monrovia, the Casablanca group, consisted of African and Arabs, but they were more left wing, if I'm not mistaken. And we're really in the same type of situation now, where the Katanga people, when I say Katanga, I'm talking about the people. Moise Shombe was a man who fought against Patrice Lumumba and fought for his province, the Katanga province. And you have the same type of situation in developing on the African continent and in North America, with the FBA crowd. They are talking about uniting the Africans, Black Americans. I don't think they even identify with the new line now that we were in Africa. We didn't come from Africa. We were here. We're natives to North America. Africa has nothing to do with the with people like myself and Melinda. And with that, sir, I think I'd like to thank you for being on the show, and we will look forward to checking you out again. And Melinda, you have anything you'd like to say? You're listening to Diasporic Music. I guess Melinda is on mute. You're listening to Diasporic Music. And thank you, sir. Ameth Lo, we will see you in the whirlwind, sir.
All right, thanks so much. And then thanks for the opportunity. Let's be vigilant and constructive and critical of what's happening, and then try to support it to move forward rather than trying to roll it back. Thank you.
And we will looking forward to bringing you back. And we are going to go to TN Providence, the Jazz Zone.